One last thing, I know we're playing the music, but Austin Metcalf's the victim, the deceased. His father went on a podcast and listened to it for yourself, but he called Karmelo Anthony a racial slur, and he also said that the reason that black people weren't on the jury is because black people are unable to hold bias from the trial because they don't know their own fathers, have a bunch of baby mamas running around living off of government assistance. So that is the thing. That's the thinking of the victim's father.
Well, let's not say that that was the victim's
I'm not saying
thinking
it was the
as well.
Of the victim, but of the victim's father.
And we'll let you sit with that. We'll be right back.
What's up, family? So The View just put out this whole segment defending Karmelo Anthony's murder conviction. And I got to be real with you. Watching grown women on national television try to justify stabbing somebody to death over a push made me understand something real clear about why some people can't be trusted to speak on justice. And this ain't about opinion. This ain't about feeling a certain way. This is about straight up facts that got proven in a court of law. A 19-year-old named Karmelo Anthony took another kid's life at a track meet. Austin Metcalf is dead, and that's the reality. We got video proof. We got 21 witnesses who saw the exact same thing. We got a body cam confession where Karmelo himself told police what he did. But instead of The View acknowledging those facts, they want to talk about jury demographics and size differences and all kinds of stuff that don't change what actually happened. The real issue here is this. The media is choosing emotion over facts because emotion sells a narrative that fits what they want to say about the system. But I'm going to break down what actually happened and show you exactly why that whole argument falls apart when you just look at the evidence straight. So with no further ado, fam, let's get into the video and what it actually shows in regards of The View choosing narrative over facts. Check it out.
This story has been, we've been following this, and so now there's new footage that has been released of the moments after high schooler Karmelo Anthony fatally stabbed Austin Metcalf at a Texas track meet in April of 2025. Take a look.
I'm not alleged.
He put his hands on me. I told him not to. He put his hands on me.
He was sentenced to 35 years in prison, which he's appealing. The case has a lot of people divided. Some people believe that race was a factor in the trial because there were no black jurors. They were all the three black jurors that were there were educators, and they were released.
They were struck.
They were struck for that. And some folks think, no, he got a fair trial. But is this a jury of his peers?
I don't think so. And you know, this has been an issue for such a long time in the judicial system where prosecutors use what are called, Batson challenges. And they
explain what that is.
It's a challenge that is used to strike a juror, generally a juror of color, for a race-neutral reason.
Right.
Because you're supposed to have a jury of your peers, and you're not supposed to just strike someone because they're black. And in this case, they gave the reasoning that they're educators, and this happened, these were high school students, and this happened at a school track meet, so they couldn't be impartial because of that. I don't think that's an appropriate reason.
They might be the best ones, too.
Yeah, I don't think it's an appropriate reason to strike black jurors, especially when it's a young black teenager on trial, and especially when that particular area is made up of 10% of an African-American community. So I don't think he got a jury of his peers. So I think on appeal, there is a legitimate thing. A legitimate reason. I also think we have to look at self-defense here because there seems to be two systems of justice at play in this country. And there have been for a very long time. I was part of the system, so I understand that, and I believe that to be true. In this case, this young man, you heard him say, he put his hands on me, and I told him not to. The kid that died, and I have so much empathy for him and his family's loss. That kid was 200 pounds. This kid was 130 pounds. And so, and the other kid was also taller than he is. He was the only black kid under the tent. And the victim here had his twin brother with him, who was also a very large person. If you don't fear for your life, if you weigh 130 pounds, I weigh 130 pounds. Facing somebody that's 200 pounds, I would be terrified of that. So I don't understand why self-defense was rejected by this jury.
All right, family. So getting to the actual video, which is the body cam footage they're referring to, and what it actually shows. And this is an example of The View doing what it does, and which I said, and Sunny Hostin saying she, quote unquote, been in the system before, worked in the system. She is actually right because she is a lawyer, because she had said, quote unquote, that she actually worked into the system, which is mean the judicial system, because she's an attorney. But the simple fact that you would discredit that when you know your profession looks at the facts, but instead you're rather lean into a narrative because it's beneficial at this time, discrediting all the hard work you did to become an attorney, or you're just not an honest attorney. Which one is it? Or good at your profession? And now I'm not saying that she's not, but I'm just saying based on the clip, how ignorant you can be to basically discredit something you work so hard for in the skill of being a licensed attorney, which your profession focus on the facts. You basically are discrediting the whole standard and the principle of your profession on the brink of a beneficial narrative. But now that I got that out of the way, family, I wanted to just show you guys that. And now Sunny Hostin's back on the screen. Karmelo was at a school track meet and he got pushed by Austin Metcalf. And this is where people get confused by all the noise. And I want to make sure the noise gets removed here in our conversation and what the video actually shows. Karmelo was at a school track meet and he got pushed by Austin Metcalf. That's where this starts. Just a push. But here's what people ain't talking about. He was told to leave. Not once, multiple times. 15 times to be exact, a witness said on the stand. Multiple times he was told to leave that tent. He chose to stay. He chose to escalate. That's important because that shows what his state of mind was. But that ain't the craziest part. Karmelo brought a knife to a school track meet. Think about that for a second. He didn't accidentally have a knife on him. He walked into that event with a blade in his backpack. That right there tells you everything you need to know about what kind of situation this was. That ain't self-defense. That's preparation. That's planning. When that push happened, when Austin pushed him, Karmelo made a choice to use that knife. Now, and I don't advocate for this. I know a lot of young men, they scuffle, they use they fist, they might, scuffle a little bit. And a lot of people would say we would rather that than obviously Austin Metcalf's life being lost and a knife being used in this. What I would say to take it a step further is advocating emotional maturity and also having a conversation, pushing, working our disagreements. Rather, we agree to disagree and getting on the same page with with an understanding, which is the best ultimate solution, I believe. But one push turned into a fatal stabbing in broad daylight with dozens of kids watching. That's what happened. He stabbed Austin Metcalf in the chest and Austin died. The body cam don't lie, family. When police got there, Karmelo admitted what he did. He told them, and you guys heard in the beginning of this, the View clip here, he told them, he told the police, I told him not to. He put his hands on me. He's literally describing a push, not a life-threatening attack. And we got 21 witnesses who said this whole thing go down, who saw this whole thing go down. Every single one of them saw the same thing. No jumping, no beating, no situation where Karmelo was getting mewed or mobbed or anything close to that. Or mauled, however you mewed, mauled, but just a push is my point. But the View keeps pushing this narrative about size. As you heard Sunny Hostin just say, oh, he was 130 pounds. The other kid was 200 pounds. So therefore it was self-defense. That's not how the law works. And Sunny Hostin knows that. And that's not how common sense works either. Size don't justify deadly force. A reasonable person don't stab somebody in the chest because they got pushed by somebody bigger. That ain't reasonable. That ain't self-defense. That's murder. And that's exactly what the jury found. But the View wants you focused on whether the jury looked a certain way instead of focusing on the fact that a young man brought a weapon to a school event and used it to take another young man's life. That's what we got to talk about.
I agree with a lot of what you're saying, especially the jury representation. That's what stood out to me. And we know there's plenty of evidence that there's sentencing disparity with people of color. The one thing to me, though, is what is the fair sentence when you take a life? And this is what I'm struggling with because this is a tragedy across the board. A 17-year-old is dead. A 17-year-old is going to likely spend 35 years in jail. He could appeal at 17. Yeah. What would you? I'd be curious what you think because I wrestle with it. If it was, God forbid, anyone in my life, I would think 30 years seems about right. If they said life, I'd say that's too long for a 17-year-old. He could be rehabilitated.
Look, I think 35 years, if there is no self-defense claim, which is an absolute claim to this crime, absolute defense, I think that would be appropriate. But if you look at other cases, there was the other case where there was a young black kid who was chased by Rick Chow, a store owner, accused of taking water bottles, which he didn't take the 4 water bottles. He chased that young boy 130 yards, which is half of a football field, and shot him in the back. claiming self-defense. And you know where he is right now? He's at home with his family because he was found not guilty.
Yeah, and there's a lot of cases like that.
If that is self-defense, I don't understand why this isn't.
But when the system fails one time, I don't think we should then say, so then the system should fail.
But they're very similar self-defense
Well, Sunny,
claims.
I had a question because I was wondering why the self-defense claim didn't work, and I had read that it said you have to use the same amount of force that was brought against you. So if someone pushes you and you push them back, that's self-defense?
That's not the standard because it's not only use, but attempted use.
Well, no, that's what I'm asking.
So if you felt your life was in danger and you felt he was going to do more than just push you, and you weigh 130 pounds and you're outweighed by 70 pounds,
so you can make that.
You know what? When I looked at this case, though, which to me is just sad every which way, right? There's two families that are destroyed. There's, Hostin Metcalf lost his life. Karmelo Anthony's going to spend at least 17 years in jail. So this is just tragic. But my question is, how did this get to this point, and where the hell were the adults?
Yeah.
These were two 17-year-olds.
Yeah.
I mean...
What I understand is, it is normal for runners to go under tents.
My kids were runners. You always do that.
And so there was some conversation that he was told to leave, and he was saying,
well, he had been invited under the tent by a friend.
Yes.
He had been invited. One last thing, I know we're playing the music, but Hostin Metcalf's the victim, the deceased. His father went on a podcast, and listen to it for yourself, but he called Karmelo Anthony a racial slur, and he also said that the reason that black people weren't on the jury is because black people are unable to hold bias in the trial because they don't know their own fathers, have a bunch of baby mamas running around living off of government assistance. So that is the that's the thinking of the victim's father.
Well, let's not say that was the victim's
I'm not saying
thinking
it was the
as well.
Of the victim, but of the victim's father.
And we'll let you sit with that.
Sunny Hostin talking about she was under the Karmelo Anthony was under the tent to see his best friend. Well, the best friend, his name is Eddie Para, who was a witness on the stand. He basically said, look, I am not friends with Karmelo Anthony. I only know him by association of his girlfriend. So the alleged best friend, it was really friends with Karmelo Anthony's girlfriend. And the only reason that quote unquote best friend, that's not really Carmelo's Anthony best friend, which is a false narrative, is actually the close friend to Carmelo's Anthony girlfriend. They wanted to make it as though it was Karmelo Anthony's best friend, but Eddie Para, who is this alleged best friend, who happens to not be his best friend for the reason why Karmelo Anthony went under the tent, is actually Karmelo Anthony's girlfriend, friend. So they only know each other as associates. I mean, we all have been there where we're basically only associate with something if we come across them, but we're not really friends with them. We just only see them if we happen to come by and see them a couple times. That's what that is. They only know each other by association because of Karmelo Anthony's girlfriend, who that alleged friend is, Eddie Para, that they try to put on as Karmelo Anthony's friend is really not Carmelo's Anthony best friend. So I wanted to make that known. And Eddie Para said that himself, the friend of Karmelo Anthony's girlfriend, on the stand. So here's what kills me about this whole thing, family. The viewers out here talking about the jury like the jury is the problem. They're saying 3 black educators got struck down from the jury, as you guys heard in this clip, because of their race. And that's the real issue. That's their argument. That's why they're running with, that's what they're running with instead of talking about the actual murder that happened. And on top of it, the narrative of the goalpost has changed so many times, from the alleged best friend that happened to not be Karmelo's best friend to, oh, Karmelo Anthony went under the tent because it was raining, to self-defense. We're going to remove all that like we've been doing this whole conversation and speaking to the facts. So when you actually break down what went down in that courtroom, that whole argument falls apart with the View saying that they struck down 3 black educators. The prosecutors had a specific reason for striking down those 3 black educators, and it wasn't about their color, it was about their job. Both of those educators worked in K-12 environments. They taught kids, not just any kids in the age range of the people involved in this case. Hostin Metcalf was a high school student. Karmelo Anthony was a high school student. And these educators work with kids just like them every single day. So the prosecution said, look, these people work in schools with teenagers. They might have bias because of their professional experience. That's a legitimate concern in the jury selection process. That's the reason they gave. But then the View and all these other people, they don't want to talk about the actual logic behind it. They just want to say it's racist. But hold up. There was a white educator on that jury. If the prosecutors were just trying to remove black people, why would they keep anybody white? Well, that white educator taught adults at a trade school. Complete different thing. Trade school ain't high school. Adults ain't teenagers. That educator wasn't working in an environment with kids like Karmelo and Hostin. So the reason for striking the black educators and keeping the white educator had everything to do with the job environment, nothing to do with race. But people don't read into this. They don't understand how jury selection actually works. And there's something called a Bastin challenge. And here's how it works in plain English. The defense says, look, I think you're striking jurors because of their race. The prosecution then has to give a race neutral reason. Can't say it's because they're black. Has to be something about whether they can be fair. Then the judge looks at the reason and decides if it's legitimate or if it's just an excuse to remove someone because of their color. In this case, the judge looked at what the prosecution said, and the judge agreed it was legitimate. Judges get a lot of power in these decisions. They have broad discretion. That means an appeals court is not going to just overturn what a judge decided unless something was clearly wrong. And the judge didn't think anything was wrong here. But here's the thing that people really don't understand, and this is the kicker. Even if Karmelo's lawyers somehow win an appeal on a jury issue, even if they convince an appeals court that there was a problem, the conviction doesn't automatically get thrown out. You know why? Because the conviction doesn't depend on whether the jury was black or white or purple. The conviction depends on the evidence, the body cam, the confession, the 21 witnesses, the knife. None of that changes based on who's sitting in the jury box. That evidence is independent. It stands on its own. So all this talk about jury demographics, all this crying about race in the jury selection, it ain't saving Karmelo. It ain't getting him off. It's just a distraction from the real issue, which is that he brought a weapon to a school event and use it to kill somebody. That's the conversation we should be having. Now, here's something that people really don't want to talk about, and I'm going to say it straight. Karmelo is sitting in a cell doing 35 years. You know why he's doing 35 years? It ain't because of his race. It's because he won't apologize. He won't show any remorse. His whole family won't show remorse either. That's the real reason right there. So, see, when you go to court and you take somebody's life, even if you're young, even if you made a mistake, what matters is what happens after. Do you own what you did? Do you acknowledge the harm? Do you show genuine change? Karmelo didn't do any of that. Instead, his family coming out and saying, man, we was wrong. Our son made a terrible choice, and we understand the Metcalf family's pain. They did the opposite. They started raising money. They pushing conspiracy theories. They acting like the system did them dirty instead of accepting reality. And here's what kills me about this. If Karmelo had shown remorse from day one, if his family had stood up and said, we accept what happened and we're sorry, even though I understand as a parent, your child, you look at your child as your baby. It always will be a baby. They could do no wrong. Even if they do wrong, you're going to stand up and fight for them to the fullest extent. But at least respect the process and get the best representation and let the representation represent your child and fight according to the process appropriately without the narratives and things being pushed out and making things divisive. And then what happens to be the verdict, you accept that respectfully because you did all you can do to make sure your child got the best option possible in this unfortunate case. And the family could have said, we're sorry. And he probably would have been looking at 10 to 15 years on a manslaughter charge. That's the difference. 20 years. The judge considers remorse in sentencing, is my point, family. That's how the system works. But instead of taking that path, they chose to keep this alive as a grift. And that's what this is. They're raising money off their son being in prison instead of trying to help him get out. They're keeping the narrative going that he's the victim, that he's a victim of the system instead of acknowledging he's a young man who made a violent choice. And the view is right. They're enabling it. They acting like the system is rigged when the problem is the choices Karmelo and his family made. Now, in The View and these other people, they keep bringing up other cases. Daniel Penny, Kyle Rittenhouse, Rick Child. They saying, oh, if all these other people got off, why can't Karmelo? But that's not how law works, family. You can't just compare cases because they both involve violence. These situations are completely different states, different laws, different facts, different self-defense claims. Rick Child was defending his son, who he said had a gun pointed at him, because the young man did have a gun. I was on the part of saying, okay, they didn't have to chase the young man and shoot him with the whole Rick Child case. But when come to find out, letting the details come out, which I like to let happen first based on the reports, he had a gun in his pants. He pulled out onto Rick Child's son, and then Rick Child's son feared for his life because he went into the store, the convenience store attached to the gas station that Rick Child and his family run to get water. Based on the footage, looked like he was still in the water, and then he had a gun in his pants. He ran off after they said, hey, you got to pay for that water. He ran off, And next thing you know, they were chasing him. They putting a gun out on Rick Child's son. So Rick Child, being a father, defending his son, and his son having a traumatic experience, self-defense. Kyle Rittenhouse had a whole different set of circumstances. Daniel Penny was a totally different situation. You got to compare cases that are actually similar. Same location, same state, same type of crime, same circumstances. That's apples to apples. What they're doing is apples to oranges. They're doing apples to meat. And then they confuse when Karmelo don't get off. But it's not confusing if you actually understand the law and the facts. The real damage in all this, though, is the message it sends to young people watching this. Every time The View and these other people stand up and defend what Karmelo did, they're telling kids that it's okay to stab somebody over a push if the narrative fits. That it's okay to bring weapons to school if you feel like you might need them. That's dangerous. That's what's breaking down our communities as a whole, no matter the race. And the simple fact is they should be talking about school safety and also making sure weapons don't be brought to school. And that's the conversation we should be actually having instead of all this noise about jury selection and systemic racism that don't change what actually happened in this case based on this specific case and what happened. But listen, this ain't just about one case. This ain't about Karmelo Anthony by himself. This is about whether we as a people are going to hold each other accountable or whether we're going to make excuses for everything running into the Victim Olympics. That's what this is really about. When The View goes on national television and defends somebody who brought a weapon to a school and used it to kill another teenager, they send in a message. That message is clear. If you're the right color and if you're the right narrative that fits what we want to say about the system, we're going to defend you no matter what you actually did, no matter what the evidence shows, no matter how many witnesses saw it, no matter what you yourself admitted to. We got to find a reason to make you a victim. And you know what that does to communities? It breaks down trust. It makes people feel unsafe because if you can stab somebody over a push and have national media figures and individuals on national television arguing that it was self-defense, what does that tell the kids in our neighborhoods? It tells them that violence is acceptable if the story sounds right. It tells them that if you got enough people willing to talk about systemic racism and jury selection, you can get away with murder. That's the message. And we wonder why our communities dealing with what we're dealing with as a whole. We wonder why young people think they can pull weapons and use them over nothing. It's because we got people with platforms telling them that's justified if the narrative fits. Now, the Metcalf family lost their son. Austin ain't coming back. His mother and father got to live the rest of their lives knowing their child was killed at a track meet over a push from another teenager. But The View ain't talking about that family's pain. They ain't centering that loss. They're more concerned with defending the person who took that life. That's backwards. Real accountability looks like something specific. It looks like a person saying, I did wrong. I hurt somebody. I violated another person's right to live. And that's what it looks like. It looks like showing genuine remorse. It looks like accepting consequences and committing to change. Karmelo had every single chance to do that. His family had every chance to do that. Instead, they chose to keep this alive as a grift, to keep raising money off his situation, to keep pushing narratives instead of accepting reality. Talk about human rights, right? Human life. And every day they do that, they make it worse for him, Karmelo Anthony. They're making parole harder. They're making his own future harder because judges and parole boards look at whether somebody learned something, whether they changed, whether they understand what they did and why it was wrong. Karmelo and his family ain't showing that. And I'm speaking on this because somebody got to say it. The media won't. The celebrities won't. The people with platforms won't. So I'm going to say defending murder because it fits your politics ain't justice. That ain't standing up for the communities as a whole. That's betraying our communities throughout the United States of America. This is a national story, countrywide. So now let me be clear about something because I know people are going to come at me saying I don't understand systemic racism. The system ain't perfect. That's real. That's documented. That's worth fighting against. There are real problems how justice gets delivered in this country. I ain't denying that. But defending murder because it fits a political narrative ain't the way to fight those problems. That ain't justice. That's betrayal. You can't build safe communities on lies and excuses. You just can't. If we really want change, if we really want a different system, it starts with being honest about what happened and holding all people accountable, including everybody in the community, in your community. The View had a chance to do that. They had a platform and they chose narrative instead. And that's what happens when emotion replaces facts, when feelings matter more than evidence, when the story you want to tell matters more than the truth of what actually occurred. Real peace don't come from defending the indefensible. Real peace comes from real accountability, from honest conversations, from looking at situations straight and calling things what they are. Let me know what you think about that, family. But I want to say something in regards to this, right? You can't build a house of peace on a foundation of lies, right? And this wisdom here is that the media is trying to help the community, quote unquote, help by making excuses for violence. But all they're doing is making the communities more dangerous. If we don't call a spade, we lose the right to complain. When chaos reaches our front door, real love for the community means holding everyone to the same standard of truth. Proverbs chapter 17, verse 15. He who justifies the wicked and he who condemns the righteous are both like an abomination to the Lord. Abomination to the Lord, not abandonment. Abomination to the Lord. Okay? So why does this fit the scripture, right? This is exactly because the View and these media outlets, what they're doing, they're justifying the wicked, making excuses for a documented murder. And by doing that, they are condemning the righteous, ignoring the victim, Hostin Metcalf, and his family's right to justice. And just human life. It's a powerful way. And I feel as though to end this video. And I want to know what you guys think about it in the comments below. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this with family who needs to hear the truth straight up without all this spin, because we need more voices speaking facts instead of narratives. Spread the peace, love, and positivity, but understand that starts with being honest about right and wrong when spreading the peace, love, and positivity. And as always, we just having a conversation, family. I'm not telling you what to think or how to think. Let me know what you guys think in the conversation. As always, we're having a productive conversation. Catch you next one. Peace.